Hello, everyone. Welcome to our CERTIFi Spotlight session. Today, we are going to be talking about our certificate program in distributed workforce management. Thank you all for joining us. Let's keep the slides going. I'm Brian Amcrott. I'm the Vice President for Workforce Credentialing and Community Impact here at Mercy University. For those of you who may have been on one of our previous Spotlight sessions, you'll see some new colors and new branding. We're really pleased here at Mercy that just a couple of weeks ago, we officially changed the name with the approval of the state of New York to Mercy University. Our certified division, which is now about a year and a half old, was designed specifically for learners like you, the working professional, someone who wants to advance their career, someone who's got a busy life, busy schedule. Whether you already have a college degree, you want to further your professional advancement without one, or you're just looking to advance skills and gain credentials, which are vital to today's workforce, CERTIFi has a program that will help get you moving. Even though today we're talking specifically about a remote work management opportunity, if you go to the website CERTIFi with an I, certifi.mercy.edu, you can see the broad range of program opportunities ranging from technology to healthcare, to leadership, to executive management, a whole host of opportunities. And we encourage any of you who have questions, who want to know a little bit more about what we're doing at CERTIFi, just drop us a line. Today's program, we're really pleased to have with us Dr. Scott Chrisman, who has developed our program in remote workforce management. After I introduce him, I'm going to turn the virtual podium over to him, and he will run through a very quick presentation overview of what you will find in the course. We encourage you to put questions you may have in the Q&A section of the chat. I will facilitate that part of our session today, putting those questions to Dr. Chrisman and asking him some of my own. And then at the end, I will wrap it up and thank you all for coming once again. Without further ado, we're very pleased that he's not only our speaker and instructor, he actually designed this course for us. Dr. Scott Chrisman has led remote teams for decades as a frontline manager and later as an executive leader. He's responsible for writing the curriculum for this class and has done the instruction for the 3 asynchronous courses, managing successful remote work environments for CERTIFi by Mercy University. He wrote his doctoral study on the enhancement of virtual sales teams. He has experience teaching remote business certificate and university MBA students in leadership. He's currently an adjunct instructor teaching MBA students leadership and management at Washington University of Science and Technology. We're really thrilled to have him join us and share his expertise and really what went into constructing this course and be able to share with us what we think you'll be able to get out of it. So without further ado, I'm going to take myself off the screen and turn it over to Dr. Scott Chrisman. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Doctor. So let's begin. We all began with what took place with COVID-19. And for 2 years, we worked remotely. Some of us had great training and others of us didn't. Here we are in 2023, and as this title states, the train has left the station. Remote work is here to stay, and it is not going away. It's going to take on many different forms. You hear about the great resistance taking place, and that is this. You hear on television, on the radio, you read different things, and different companies are requiring all of their people to come back to work. But the reality is about 42% of the potential workforce in the United States is working remotely right now. And what's interesting about those that are working remotely, typically these are people that are higher educated and they make more money. And this is the big question that is always asked when someone is required to come back into the office. Here is what they ask. What will change if I come back into the office? And typically, many companies will say to their people, we're going to go back to what we used to do in the past. And so the question then becomes, why do I have to come back into the office to attend 15 different Zoom or go-to meetings every day when I could do that from my own home? You see, people that are working from home want to stay at home to do their work. All they want to know is this: what do you expect from me? Define very clearly for me, what are the expectations? And I want to give you a great example of that. There was a couple, husband and wife, they lived in New York, and COVID-19 hit. They asked if they could move to Montana. How different could that possibly be? And their company said, sure, go ahead, be my guest. They went to Montana, were able to afford a home, and they kept their same jobs. Not only were they able to perform at the current level that they had, but they were able to perform at a higher level. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But then when COVID-19 came to an end, their boss called and said, we need you to come back into New York. And they said, I can't do that. And they said to their boss, again, what will change if we were to move back? And their boss said, we're just going to go back to what we used to do before. And they said to their boss, you know, we're performing at a higher level than we did before when we were in the office. Yes, a lot gets accomplished at the water cooler. But here's what happens. Did you know that when you're in an office and you are disrupted by somebody walking into your office, that it takes you, once they finish with you, whatever that is, it takes you at least 30 minutes to get back on track to where you were before? And those kind of things don't happen when you work remotely. Another big difference is simply this. I've had many people say to me, you know, Scott, is it more difficult to work in virtual teams, or I should say lead virtual teams, than having a co-located teams? And the answer is yes. It is more challenging to lead virtual teams for a variety of different reasons. But the end result is ultimately this. What is it as a leader that you want to accomplish? You want to hire the most talented people. You want to give them specific direction on what to do, how to do, and when to do it, and then follow up. And whether those people live, you know, work remotely or in the office, the result that you should be looking at is, did they achieve and exceed the expectations that you set for them? And one of the major challenges with leading remote teams is this thing called communication versus engagement. When you work in an office, there's a lot of communication taking place. A casual conversation with somebody coming by, they send you an email message, they might send you a half a dozen email messages. What the most important thing in remote learning, it's about engagement. My past background is in professional athletics many years ago. Engagement is like a football game. People are engaged in hitting each other. The difference between communication and engagement is the key to remote learning, is this. Engagement is not just simply about sending an email to someone or making a phone call. Engagement is the kind of follow-up that you do with your team individually. And that is the key to remote leadership. That is the key to having the best possible team you can have, and a team that executes better than anyone else. It's no longer about communication, and now is all about how do you engage with your team. And here's the key to it all. This is the key. It's all about trust. It's trust between the leader and their team members. It's trust between the team members themselves with each other. And it's the trust that the team members have with their leader. These are the keys. As I said, the train's left the station and remote work is here to stay, whether we want to be a part of it or not. Let's go to the next slide. What I want to talk to you about now is there are 3 courses. And when we developed these courses, we did them in such a way that they meld into each other. You could take course 2 or course 3. You can move them around any way that you want. But there was a natural progression with each of these. And so we start off with the first course, Managing Successful Remote Teams. What's the environment? And so I want to give you just a little bit of description for each one of these. And then certainly, put your questions you might have. And again, when we're done, I'll be happy to answer any of those. So there is significant value in remote work models for both companies and the employees themselves. As a leader, your objective is to hire the most talented people you can. And the reality is, on a field, whether it's work, whatever it is, those companies that have the most talented players and are given specific direction, more often than not, they are the ones that are going to win. And again, in remote teams can be as successful or even more successful than collated teams. So remote teams are different in that they need to be led differently. You work with remote teams completely different than you do with collated teams. They're different. That's all part of this process. It's what makes it more difficult. The differences between remote team communication and engagement, I talked about that just a couple of minutes ago. And in this course, I go into great detail between the difference between communicating with someone and actually engaging with someone. And then I talk about the issues that diminish the effectiveness of remote teams. I can give you specific examples, and I do give specific examples of what doesn't work in a remote team. And then obviously, what are the best practices? What are the things that you're going to want to do on a daily and weekly basis that you might not do in a collated team? Let me give you an example. Some of the best remote teams, they meet together for 10 minutes in the morning, 3 or 4 days a week. And they meet in the afternoon for 10 minutes, 3 or 4 days a week, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page with each other. And the bottom line is this: remote teams can and do outperform collated teams. And you're going to say to yourself, why is that? Because they have a better plan. Because they know exactly how they're being measured. They know exactly what is expected from them. And they know exactly how to go out and execute a plan, because the leader is not just communicating with them, the leader is engaged with them. Let's go on to course 2. Okay, course 2, creating and leading high-performing virtual teams. Here's some of the subjects that we talk about. I talk about what are the challenges? How do you avoid having these kind of problems versus collated teams? Accountability, that is key in remote teams. The difference between remote teams or what might be called hybrid teams is the engagement and the expectations and the follow-up with each member, or we might call follower, on each of these teams. And then you've got to decide, as I said in the beginning, this isn't all about whether you are remote or whether you're all collated. You may have a hybrid team where they come into the office 1 or 2 days a week or 3 days a week, whatever it is that you work out. And then I think if you have a completely remote team, you all want to get together at least once a year, if not twice a year. You can have your own parties online, which we've done in the past with Zoom calls, where we party once a month with each other. One leadership style is probably more effective in hybrid and fully remote teams. There's one style that is probably more effective than any other, and we talk about what that style is. Why we talk about why ongoing training and development is vital to performance in virtual teams. What happens often is we train someone in the beginning, and then we send them out to do whatever they're going to do, and then we meet with them once a quarter to review how they're performing, and that's it. In either a hybrid or a fully remote team, you're constantly training. You're constantly developing your people. And we talk about some very specific things that you can do that might be different than in collated teams. Here's an issue. It doesn't seem very big, but it is crucial to individuals. There is a reality that some people would prefer to work in the office. And if that's possible, that's what you do. Some people want to feel like they're more in the know, that they're rubbing shoulders with the leader, and that somehow being in the office, that they're going to be recognized more than someone who is out in a remote location. It doesn't have to be that way, because in the end, what leaders really do is they're viewing people's performance and how they're able to perform. And then finally, it's developing an action plan that enhances the motivation of that individual and the productivity of everyone that is in that remote team. Let's go on to course 3. So in course 3, we kind of wrap all of this up. How do you build a sustainable remote team? How do you do this? And before I go over each of the topics discussed here, let me just say this. It's constant change. Companies and people are successful in the 21st century because they're willing to adapt and make changes on the fly. And that is key in those remote teams that win. Okay? You develop this dynamic corporate culture. Let me give you an example. And it's the leader, by the way. If the leader at your company fully believes in remote teams, he or she will dedicate all the resources that are needed in order to be successful. What might some of those be? Maybe you have your own portal for your own team, your own website for your own team. And I talk about that in some detail when we get into the training. The complexities in corporate culture where many employees work remotely is different. And the leadership at the top must have what I call a working knowledge of what that is. And if they do, then you're successful. If they're kind of him-hawing around, it doesn't work so well. Okay? We talk about the value and the components of teams working together and developing agreements together. In the 21st century, there's so much technology that's taking place that more often than not, people have to work successfully in teams. And the expectation is that they do work together. And does that become more challenging when you're remote and you're not sitting around the conference table? Well, you can accomplish the same thing through, some of the kind of conference technology, GoToMeeting, Zoom, whatever it might be. In fact, more often than not, you are more successful as a team because you have to have a working knowledge of who's to the left of you, who's to the right of you. And you spend more time together in virtual teams than you would collated teams. There's always this assumption that when people are in the office, that everybody hears everything that goes on. It doesn't really happen that way. But in remote teams that in order to be close to each other, you are dependent upon some skills that you will learn in these courses that will help you with that. I talked a little bit before about the complexities and values of developing an equitable workplace. And I'm not going to get into it right now, but there's a big difference between equality in the workplace and equity in the workplace. And we talk about that specifically. And then how to remain relevant as a team member or leader in remote teams. And we talk about the importance of that. And how do you do that? You do that through communicating with each other. And we'll talk about in very specific terms the many different ways that you can accomplish that. We talk about how to create a team working agreement driven action plan that allows you the best opportunity for your team to succeed and exceed the expectations. As I mentioned before, each of these courses are designed to meld into each other. But the reality is, being a leader in a virtual team is different and has many different aspects to it than leading a collated team. And if we are to be successful in the 21st century, we have to some way find out how collated teams and virtual teams can work together in order to be successful. And I've been doing this for a lot of years, both as a follower, then as a senior leader. I earned my MBA online. I earned my doctorate online. And so I know how to make this work because I live it on a daily basis. Where I teach today at Washington University of Science and Technology, I teach MBA students leadership and management, and it is all accomplished remotely online. Well, I thank you for having me here today, and I'm more than willing to answer any questions that anyone has. Thank you.
So please feel free to throw some questions in the Q&A, but I'm going to kick off a conversation with Dr. Chrisman, and going to jump right into it. And I know this may be digging into some of the content of the course, so don't feel like you have to go into great detail with these questions, but just interested to hear your thoughts. I think people assume that if you're in a remote environment, it just means Zoom all the time, right? And is that or is that the case, that you're just like constantly going to be on computer, on screen?
No, it doesn't. In fact, some of the great things, and I kind of hinted to this before, when you have remote teams, some of the things that you do is have a website where you can deliver information to. You can make videos and send them to that particular site where you're not having a Zoom meeting to address all of those issues. You already have a portal or a website that has the answers to many of the questions you might already have.
A couple other questions that come to mind, and now thinking specifically about people who would be taking this course. Does the size of your team make a difference as to whether this type of training would be useful for you?
No, I don't think so. What we're seeing are teams becoming smaller and smaller. Teams are usually about 6 to 10 people at a time. You may have more than that, but usually somewhere between 6 and 10. And in the classroom itself, just by the way, somewhere between 10 and 15 people is pretty, you know what it is? It allows me to spend, when there's 15 people in a class, it allows me to spend more time with each one of those people. And I will say this, let me just, I'll go off stage here just for a quick second. I still have people who call me today that say, Scott, Dr. Chrisman, I got this issue. How would you deal with it? And I just give options. And then they're going to decide whatever direction they want to go. But I've been able to develop some pretty good relationships with people over the years.
And when you think about, who will most benefit from this sort of training, we've titled the program Remote Work Management. What, are we thinking management at all, at sort of any level? Is there, is this more useful for someone who's, at the mid-level, or someone who's really at the executive level? I think when someone's trying to figure out, is this for me, that may be a question that they're asking.
Well, basically building a culture in the organization, that's going to come from the leader at the top. So we could start from there. he or she believes in remote work, then it's going to be very successful. If he or she doesn't, it's not going to be very successful. But it's good for everyone at all levels. And this is maybe seem a little odd, but those who are the followers, those that are following the orders and going out and doing the sales and whatever it might be, it's good for them too, because then they know what they should expect from their leader. And if they don't receive that from their leader, they should be asking them for that information.
Do you get into the let's say the consumer facing side or customer facing side of what it means to be on a remote team? Because it's not just the team itself, a business itself that's remote these days. I mean, and this is not news, but people who are shopping online, they're dealing with a remote organization. So do you think a little bit about how you would train for great customer service and customer engagement when people are not used to dealing with people face to face anymore?
Exactly. And we do not spend a lot of time working on the customer side of it. But I will say this, let me give you a perfect example. You end up dialing an 800 number and you end up having 6 different locations that you can go to. That's got to end. You need to make one phone call and speak to the person that you need to speak to. It becomes very frustrating. But we don't spend a tremendous amount of time talking about consumer back to the company or leadership. We don't. We mostly focus on leadership and their followers and managers at virtually all levels.
And I did see a question come in, and this was something I was going to mention anyway about pricing. If we will share with everyone who signed up the direct link for registration. There are 3 separate modules that make up the entire course. Each module could be taken on its own for $695, or we bundle the whole program together as a $2,000 package. If you are interested in coming together as a group to engage in the program, please just send a message, and that's something that we can talk about. Obviously, for a company to bring its whole team together to take this training, that's something we'd love to arrange as well. Another question that comes to mind, when you think about the let's say the onboarding side of bringing someone new into the team, right? Talk a little bit about how is it a very different experience? What you led off with, and you said a number of times, is like, well, people they want to go back to what things used to be, with an assumption that the way things used to be was always better. And I think you're trying to dispel us a little bit of that myth. But think about that question of someone new coming into a group in a remote environment, maybe where that team did start initially as a face-to-face group.
Exactly. I think there's value, first of all, to hire people who have already experienced and understand the expectations in a remote environment or a hybrid environment. All right. There's real advantages to that. They already, how should we say, they have the mindset, they have the tools already to function better at that. And what you're seeing now too is people are leaving companies because the companies are making them come back to the office. And so they're looking for a remote position that may be similar to what they were doing before. Because as I said, what I'm trying to do here and what the university is trying to do is to give leaders at all levels, including their followers, to give them the tools that they need to go out and be successful using either a hybrid model or using a totally remote model. And we're just giving you the tools to go accomplish that. And I will say this, like I said before, I have people that still call me and they ask. The students call me, okay? Even though this is an asynchronous course, they call me, they say, hey, Dr. Chrisman, I've got this problem. What do you think? And I say, I don't know enough about your company, but I'm going to give you 3 options. And then you decide which one is the best for you. And then tell me why you think it's the best option.
And would you agree that in today's, at least the labor market right now, which is highly competitive, that a company that's not embracing this, at least as an option, is hurting themselves?
It is, because in the end of the day, what do we want to accomplish? Again, I go back to my athletic background. The goal in every company is to win. And in order to win, you have to have the most talented people on the field out executing. And so some of those best people are working remote. And when you tell them to come back in the office, they're going to say to you, listen, I didn't know you were measuring my performance, whether I was in the office or not. I thought you were measuring my performance and what I accomplished in the job description that you gave me.
And do you think with the, a training program such as this, if I gave you the example that, hey, I've been in the workforce for a long time, I've risen through the ranks, I actually, I did some organizational leadership training, emotional intelligence training, and I know what I need to know. Like I've been successful before this shift happened. Were all of those, leadership approaches that were more conventional before we had the shift to remote learning, did that give me everything I need to know? Tell me really what I'm going to get that's new here.
Okay. Let me give you an example. Before, if you were a collated team, your boss would just kind of mosey by your door, say, do you have 2 minutes? And what are you going to tell them? No, you're going to tell them yes. And as I shared with you before, as soon as he or she finishes with you, it takes you half an hour. It takes you half an hour to get back on track again. Why go that direction? I don't know anybody that works in remote teams and wants people calling them all the time. It doesn't work that way. I talked earlier about having your own portal for all the team to communicate with each other. Okay, you could have your own website to communicate with each other. Fundamentally, the way that we engage, we get away from the communication side, and now we get into an engagement side. So when we are together, it is really meaningful for the person on the other end to hear what somebody has to say. If that was the case, that's interesting, Brian, that you say that. And if that was the case, we wouldn't have these problems with, and I won't mention the companies that are trying to make their people come back into the office again. And for many of them, you know why they're bringing them back in the office? Because they got to pay the rent. That is, if there's any major reason, that seems to be the major reason. In fact, what you're not hearing is that these companies are moving out of these multi-story buildings and moving into warehouses. They don't need the space anymore. These are the people that have figured it all out.
Yeah, so I mean, you could argue that the paying the rent, they have to pay anyway, right? So they're trying to justify paying the rent, but they're bringing the people back doesn't help them pay the rent.
No, and the reality is, here's what's funny: the people coming back are saying, "I'm sitting in my office all day, going from one Zoom meeting to another." Well, I could have done that at home. Okay, I could have just been at home dealing with these Zoom meetings.
So you mentioned a couple of times a hybrid model, and could you talk about that, especially as it relates to and I'll share a business like we have at a university, where we still have a lot of frontal engagement with our primary purpose with the students that we serve. So a full remote engagement is really is not likely to happen. So figuring out that mix of the who on the team needs to be in person, and you had on your slide, one of your earlier slides, and I think we all recognize this when the pandemic hit, that it was often the people who were defined as the essential workers that needed to come in person, but quite often were still some of the lowest paid and lowest appreciated, to be honest, in lots of businesses. And how do we square that circle where that's still going to be a reality in many work environments? What's the element of sense of place and sense of respect for those people who are not going to be able to make that shift because that's the nature of the job function they serve?
Yeah, that's the nature of the beast. And Brian, you're exactly right. It's always going to be that way. What I think companies have to do is how do I show value to that person who's not making as much money as somebody else that can work remotely? How do we compensate those people? How do we recognize those people other than just giving them a pat on the back? Okay, are there things that we can do? The reality in life is not everybody gets to work remotely. You think about medicine, when you think about retail, when you think about manufacturing, these folks are almost always going to have to go into the office, and that's the way it is. But companies need to rethink then, how are we going to compensate people for that? What incentives do we have for people? And the reality is it's never perfect. And it's, since COVID, this is going to take time to figure out. Maybe there were some positions that we brought back in that maybe could go back and be remote again. It's not a perfect science. And it's not all, and I say this, it's not always fair. Okay. And I don't know that it will ever be perfectly fair. But as a leader of a company, you have that responsibility. And that's a great point that you bring up.
Just one last question from my end, and then I'll give you the opportunity just to wrap up. Just anecdotally, as you've been doing this, like what are some of the craziest things or maybe biggest mistakes that you heard people make in this space when they're shifting to remote? Now they've got a lead. What is it that people just get wrong over and over again?
What they get wrong is out of sight is out of mind. And they forget to engage with the people that are now remote. And they get too caught up with everybody else that's in the office. And they forget about how important these people are that are working remotely.
Right. Any last final thoughts as we wrap this up?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah.
No, listen, I love what I do. I love this. I believe in it. I work it every single day of my life. In fact, today I'm in another part of the country doing this. I'm not at home doing this. And so I would also just say anybody that's out there, if they want to talk to me personally and they want some more in-depth information on this, I'm more than willing to spend the time with them, whatever they want to do, because this is a big decision for companies. And for the companies that are still working remote, they have to keep saying to themselves, are we doing the right things? And we, through these courses, can help them do the right things right.
So we certainly appreciate your willingness to engage with people who have interest. Anyone who wants to learn a bit more, we encourage you to look on our website. Send us, a quick email if you like. CERTIFi, CERTIFi @mercy.edu. And someone from our team will get back to you right away. I want to thank Dr. Chrisman again. I want to thank our team here at CERTIFi and at Mercy University for putting this webinar together. And we look forward to hearing from you and engaging with you wherever you may be in the future. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. God bless everyone.